going on, YouTube? Today we have a little bit of a different video, something a few of you guys have been asking for in my comment section and that I've seen all over my social medias is how do I get started? What do I do to my bike? How do I upgrade my bike? What kind of bars do you run? What suspension? Parts do you put on your bike? Some stuff like that. So I figured why not go ahead, make a little video on this and put this information out there so I can redirect some of those comments to this video. So we'll start with number 5 is suspension. Now, as you can see behind me, I have TCD racing suspension. That is the very, very first thing I do to a bike. If you're new to this sport and you just picked up a brand new bike, suspension on your bike is probably gonna be okay for you. That's why I'm putting this at number 5, because if you're a beginner, you're not really gonna notice a difference between coated suspension and just the stock stuff. For a little bit more advanced riders, the suspension is more of a necessity because it's based off of your weight, it's based off of your riding skill, and everybody's a little bit different. And a lot of people and a lot of riders have different preferences. As you can see on my bike, I have fully kitted out AEKTIV suspension, which is valved extremely stiff, probably stiffer than Supercross suspension, just for the big jumps and stuff that I do. I have the little fork bleeders up top to let the air out, the DLC lower coating on the bottom forks, the Kashima coated forks, and then I have Kashima coat on the shock along with the triple shock adjuster, which obviously some of that stuff is a little bit over the top for most people. And if you're a beginner rider, you're not gonna need any of that. If you've been riding for a couple years and you're starting to jump and stuff, I would 100% suggest going to your local suspension guy or going through like a TCD Racing or a Factory Connection, giving them your weight, giving them your skill level and what type of riding, whether, you know, mostly you'll probably be riding motocross. There's motocross, supercross, arena cross, enduro, a lot of different categories you can kind of slot into, and those all require different setups. Okay, number 4 is handlebars. I would consider handlebars almost a necessity even if you are a beginner. Now, it's a little difficult to find what I would call your bar bend. It takes a little bit of trial and error to kind of figure that out. There's different measurements for bars. There's different lengths, different bends. If you're a taller rider like me, you'll probably like a more neutral or a little bit forward. A slightly less cramped rider triangle, slightly more like knee area kind of when you're cornering and sticking your leg out. I know some of the shorter riders as well like having their bars rolled back, which makes them a little bit lower and puts them more in your lap. Obviously, the greatest racer of all time, Ricky Carmichael, was a little bit shorter. And if you go and look at some of his old videos and photos, you'll notice that his bars were pretty rolled back. Pretty sure he even has the RC bend, I believe Pro Taper or Renthal makes one of those. They allow for a better feel for shorter riders. Now, if you really wanted to get into detail, you can notice how I have my bar mounts in the forward holes in my triple clamps. I also have the Pro Taper Fusion handlebars and I run them in the unlocked position. I run them about as flush as possible. And what that does is it allows me to have one better feel of the motorcycle in the front end because I'm more of a front end rider. I like to get over the front of my bike more. I'm a taller rider. That allows me to feel the front end and control the front end a little bit more. But keeping the bars flush keeps everything a little bit more neutral and I don't really feel like I have almost like freestyle bars. I know I get a lot of slack from my buddy Jeff Walker on this because he does think I run like a freestyle setup. But
he did race professional motocross, but kind of decided to take the free rider, big whip, like content guy approach. So he has a very unique and odd handlebar setup where he puts them in the front mounting holes and spins his bar mounts forward. So his bars are way out front and he has like borderline Supercross suspension.
I ran this while I was racing and it just allows me to feel the front end more and it adapts to my riding style. Now, number 3 is something I would say probably 90% of the people at the track have, but if you're a beginner, you probably won't know about it, and that is the hole shot device. Now, I personally use the Works Connection hole shot device. I know a couple companies make them. I believe Tamer makes hole shot devices. Pro Taper actually makes a self-locking hole shot device, but I truly believe that the Works Connection one works the best. It's the simplest. Now what this does is you drill and mount this into your fork guard. I actually have it a little bit lower than where it recommends, and I do put it on the side because on the Yamaha fork guards, if you put it directly in the middle, the plastic is really thin and it likes to rip out. But you mount this to your fork guard and then you mount this piece right here to the bottom of your fork. And what this does is you'll push down on the forks and have somebody lock this. It'll lock in and keep the forks compressed. When you do a start, your front end will be compressed and you'll have a lot more control over the bike and you won't have to really worry too much about looping the bike out. Now, obviously that's not something that you need to have, especially if you're not planning on racing. Something that I would highly recommend for anybody that's gonna start getting into racing. They wanna be prepared and make sure that they're getting everything they possibly can out of their experience. Now, number 2 would be foot pegs. Now, foot pegs for me is a pretty big one because the stock pegs that come on your bike, I don't wanna say no good, but they don't have very much to them. They're very, very plain, and they can just become very slippery, especially after a few rides on them, which can result in a couple sketchy moments or even a crash and possibly an injury. So what I have on my bike is I have the titanium pro pegs. They're a little dull right now. Obviously they have some hours on them, but they are way, way more reliable than the stock pegs would be. Obviously they're gonna chew up your boots a little bit more than the stock pegs would. As you can tell, these things are still pretty sharp, pretty gnarly. You obviously wouldn't want to cut yourself on these, but the feeling you get with your foot on them versus the stock pegs is second to none, and it allows for way safer riding and less risk of your feet slipping off of the pegs.
I'm Nick Thomas, one of the founding members of NICKT. I've been racing motocross since the age of 3. We all know how expensive this sport is and the dedication it takes. Being a privateer is not easy, and that's why NICKT was founded. NICKT allows you to earn extra cash for the riding gear, bike parts, and dirt bikes you no longer use. It's a community full of riders, including racers and privateers like myself. It keeps my program going.
Okay, and number 1 is probably a little bit more different than most people's number 1s would be, but it's something I literally cannot ride without, and that's a seat cover. The stock seat covers that come on most of the OEM bikes are extremely slippery. They don't have any ribs in them, and what they'll do is they'll cause you to slide back and forth on the bike a lot more than if you had a seat cover with some ribs and a different texture, because the stock texture, at least on the Yamahas and a few of the other OEM bikes that I've ridden, is not very good. It's very, very slippery, and it's just not super enjoyable. In my opinion, I've noticed some more beginner riders and people that are just kind of getting into it. They got a brand new bike, or maybe they've been riding for a few years, haven't really done anything to the bike yet, and they're looking for the very first upgrade, and this is what I would do. A lot of these bikes have a lot of torque, a lot of power nowadays, and with the OEM seat cover, you're gonna be sliding back. No matter how much you're gripping with your knees, it's very, very tough to stay in the right position with a very slippery seat cover. Obviously, mine has some hours on it. You can tell I have the ribs to keep me in place as best as possible. The texture's a little bit thicker, a little bit grippier, and it allows me to stay exactly where I need to on the bike. Even some of the more advanced supercross and motocross riders, sometimes they will put a hump either right here, right here, right here. I've seen some way up here even. They are riding at such an advanced level that they'll put a hump of foam inside of their seat to keep them where they need to be, either off the start, in the corners, to prevent them from sliding back. Now, if you have any other questions regarding buying products, the right product for you, and even if you just want to hear my opinion on some stuff, you can go over to mxlocker.com or download the MXLocker app. Now have the option to talk with an expert, which they have a handful of experts, including me, Jeff Emig, Jeff Walker, and multiple other riders. They're there to give you their opinion and answer some of your questions for you. Now, I figured I would throw out a couple honorable mentions that are great upgrades, but they're not actually necessities that you need. And I'll start off with these ARC clutch and front brake levers. They have a really nice texture on them. Super nice. They fold away. Especially if you're a newer rider to the sport, you're gonna fall. But if you have these on, you won't have to worry about breaking the lever, and you can just pick your bike right back up and get after it. Now, one last honorable mention, which is something I don't even have on my bike, but I know a ton of people give me slack on this, and it is probably the first upgrade that people usually go to, and that is an exhaust pipe. Now, obviously, it's not a necessity. Your bike does come with an exhaust. It's not gonna not come with an exhaust, right? The stock exhaust on all of the OEM bikes are great, and I believe some of the bigger companies like FMF even make the pipes for the OEMs. Usually, the stock exhaust is a tiny bit heavier, doesn't sound the best, and a lot of people will agree it's probably not the most attractive, but it's not a necessity. I personally don't even run one. If you're looking for just a little bit of extra horsepower, a little bit more performance, and to shave some weight off your bike, exhaust from either FMF, Pro Circuit, Yoshimura, any of the top brands is gonna help out a little bit. But yeah, those are my top 5 must-have bike upgrades for the entry-level, beginners, and intermediate riders. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of these type of videos. I definitely think it's nice to have this out there. It adds a little bit more value to the channel. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And again, go download the MXLocker app or head over to the website. But until next video, I will catch you guys later.